What is going on, guys? It's QD Paintball, and today I want to talk about J4 and the torque. Before we get started, I just want to say that I am in no way sponsored by J4. I just want to support a company that is here to improve our sport. If you guys aren't familiar with J4, it's a small paintball manufacturer that first released the torque in, I believe, 2014. The torque unfortunately had a troubled launch, ranging from a number of issues, with outsourced parts to tolerances being out. These issues resulted in unreliable performance, really poor efficiency, to down markers. You may ask, how has J4 managed to survive after such a release? Well, they never really disappeared. They stayed around and took warranty work over the years to make sure that their customers were cared for. As the years have gone by, they have quietly been making updates to the platform, performing further R&D on the design, as it was originally rushed to market. Fast forward to 2020 and you'll see that J4 has become very active. So make sure you check out their Facebook page. As they have always had a rather intriguing design, a stacked tube spool, their current market is kind of begging for another stacked tube marker. And I think a decent following has been patiently rooting for J4. So let's see where they're at now. As I've mentioned in my previous shooting videos, I have a batch 1.75 torque. They're currently on batch 2 and are selling for around $800. My initial first impressions of the J4 was the weight of it. The marker looks like it would be huge and heavy given its physical dimensions, but it actually only weighs in at 775 grams. Compare that to the LV1, which is 802, and the Cyborg 6, which is 908 grams. And if you want to count the E-Tech 5, that's at over 1,000 grams. The spacing of the grips and the trigger guard is quite nice, where I don't imagine many people will be smothering a marker of its size. My biggest issue I had with it was the back grip. It's quite blocky and wide, not ergonomically ideal. Many people that have larger hands may not find issue with this, but for me personally, with smaller hands, it could be tapered, and I think everyone would think it's an improvement. So what did I do? I put a toothpick underneath it again. The routing or layout of the marker is quite nice, with a good amount of efficiency. It's a marker I don't find to be a pain to disassemble, which is always really nice and convenient. At the bottom, you have a lever ASA. The ASA also houses the regulator. Air travels up through the rear grip directly into the solenoid or switch, which has and currently is being revised again. The original 3 O-ring spool was atrociously inefficient. They then went to the 4 O-ring spool, which mine has, and I believe they're reworking it again to be 3 O-rings. As you can see, there's essentially a constant supply of air that runs through the guide, through the piston, past the valve assembly, and into the air chamber. Given the physical size of the spool engine, you need a decent amount of volume, and they were able to utilize the foregrip for additional volume. As you can see, pretty logically laid out. The pilot activates the spool switch, redirecting the supply air to behind the piston, which drives it forward. The spring starts to compress as the tip of the piston extends beyond the valve body. The air is released from the air chamber and through the valve and up through the bolt, propelling the ball. Just as the air is being released, the spring begins to extend again and actually allows for a small amount of air to be recaptured before dumping entirely down the bolt. They were and possibly are still testing a heavier spring to allow for more air to be recaptured. So how does it shoot? Well, if you guys have watched my previous shooting videos, it can be a tad loud. Some have commented that it sounds like a cannon with quite a clack, a very distinct sound.
That sounds so much better than mine.
Some things to note though, when I first got the marker, which is used, I could not get it over 240 FPS. With the reg completely maxed out, the pressure just wouldn't reach 280 feet per second. Now, there were 2 things I needed to address. There was a redundant spacer from the previous design that wasn't allowing the spool and the switch to open entirely. With that small spacer removed, it bumped it up about 15 FPS. Now, the other solution was adding a nylon washer into the existing regulator, increasing the operating pressure of the marker, and with that, I was finally able to reach 300 FPS, not entirely maxed out in the reg, and with a good paint to bore match. Now, there's the rub though. The marker should not be operating at such a high pressure to get to 280 FPS. The higher pressure is compensating for a poor seal somewhere. J4 believes it's the number 13 seal around the piston. Air is escaping around that seal, not allowing for a sufficient amount of air to drive that piston forward. To compensate, higher pressure. They've also found that the seal is made worse in heat, as the body is expanding more than the piston, allowing even more air to escape past the seal. So the result, unfortunately, is a harsh shot that wasn't originally intended. Louder and with more kick, I believe it's operating at over 200 psi with the nylon washer. I guess what I'm saying is maybe my marker is not the most accurate representation of the torque. But that being said, the marker shoots reliably and still with quite a bit of smoothness. The shot feels quite confident and robust. And I believe that also lies within the Hall effect sensor. The sensor is located under the bolt and detects whether the bolt has finished its cycle. If the bolt does not, the sensor of the torque will increase the dwell, increasing the amount of time the solenoid is open, allowing for more air to build until the bolt cycles. So no more fiddling around with dwell or having issues with first shot drop off. Another trick feature about the torque is the Sci-Fi board. If you guys aren't familiar with Sci-Fi, they make boards that allow for connectivity through your phone via Bluetooth. This is my first experience with the Sci-Fi board and it's awesome. It's so easy and convenient to change settings. It's really not a hassle using your phone or needing it around to make any parameter changes. Also, rechargeable batteries, definitely a major plus. Charging is done via micro USB. No proprietary charger here. Maintenance is pretty simple on the marker. Remove the back cap, pop the bolt pin up, slide it forward, drop it down, and push the piston assembly out the back. Apply a bit of grease around the piston and the guide, and I like to apply a bit of residue to the bolt O-rings. Assemble and you're good to go. So, what are my final thoughts? Despite the flaws in my unit, I'm still very much intrigued by it. Obviously, its performance is less than ideal, but it's still performing reliably, showing off the design's robustness, which I believe really says a lot. J4 is still very active answering any of my questions and are really working to make a fantastic product. They're revising the solenoid, and I'm told they're lightening the spool to reduce its weight and the amount of pressure required to cycle. Future updates will be provided for the older units as well. That being said, I should also mention their warranty. Their warranty follows the marker for life. If you buy a used torque and you end up having issues with it, they will accept taking that marker in and will get it working. And if they can't, they'll actually send you a new marker. So who actually has a better warranty than that, or care for their customers? They just want every single torque shooting, and I think that's quite admirable, especially given the size of the company. So I have a lot of respect for J4 for sticking around for as long as they have, and for still trying to make an innovative product. A segue off of innovation, J4 has received a new patent, which could potentially have a massive impact on the industry. The patent is for the feedback circuit for pneumatic launchers, a mechanical system that will allow most paintball markers to self-time and cancel out the trigger signal, allowing for more mechanical paintball designs that normally wouldn't function from a normal trigger input. This new design allows for many existing marker designs to be able to be produced in a mechanical format, with the timing being based on feedback taken at several points in the system, even from mechanical inputs and related. This design cancels the trigger input within milliseconds of the feedback input, allowing the valve to reset and recharge even while the trigger is held down. J4 intends for this technology to be accessible to all paintball manufacturers, encouraging the use of this tech for other companies, and will even be providing design input and an aid running parts to allow for retrofitting to existing platforms. With this can really open the door to mechanical paintball, as now more manufacturers can get involved, potentially using their own current designs. J4 is really out for growing the sport and the community. Please stick around, keep an eye out for J4 as well, and I'll see you guys in the next video.